What is a secret you're taking to your grave but can share here anonymously? In 1994, my best friend and roommate passed away while his extended family was sleeping, and I didn't tell anyone for an hour. He had AIDS, Kaposi sarcoma, and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He had not been awake for almost 3 days. 6 months prior, he weighed 170 pounds. When he passed, he weighed under 100 pounds and looked like a skeleton wrapped in paper. A week before he died, his extended family came to stay in our house. His mother, his 2 sisters, and their husbands were all sleeping in the living room and guest bedrooms. It was about 3 a.m., and I had come to sit with him after going to the bathroom. After about a half hour of just sitting with him, I heard his breathing get shallow and labored. I just held his hand. A half hour later, his breathing stopped altogether. I did not tell anyone in the moment because his mother would have called 911, started CPR, made him breathe with the breathing bag/mask, etc. She had fought with him to get him to stay in the hospital and had been, understandably, insufferable. He had told me and them he didn't want any of that. He was so tired, and without the constant morphine, he was in so much pain. I left the room and went back to mine. His sister found him about an hour later. I never told anyone that. Love and miss you, Charles. When my grandfather had his first heart attack and went into a coma, things were looking really grim. My uncle went to his house and did some snooping under the guise of making sure bills got paid. He found my grandfather's portfolio and discovered that he had just shy of $3 million in savings and investments. What came next was a downward spiral of increasingly vicious infighting and greed over several days, as my mom and her siblings went to war with each other over who would get what when he died. And then he got better. Woke up one day, spent months recovering in specialty care, and eventually went home. A few months later, he announced to the family that he'd been semi-conscious the whole time, had heard their fighting, and decided that they were all getting nothing and that everything was going to charity. A year later, when he had the second heart attack that killed him, the family went into war mode over his money again. That's when they discovered that he'd kept his word and donated all but $300,000 before he died. His will donated most of what was left to charity and gave everyone else token amounts. My cousins and I were given $10,000 each as cash, and his will stipulated that money could be taken from the $300,000 to pay off any outstanding student loan obligations for myself or my cousins, and that anything left over went to the same charity. My mom, aunts, and uncles, and his own sister and her kids were all given $100 each. The sole and only exception to all of this was one of my cousins who was raising 3 small children as a widow after her husband was killed in an accident. My grandfather paid off her mortgage before he died and swore her to secrecy. We didn't find out he'd done that until years later. My secret? He was never conscious while he was in that coma. I recorded those arguments on my phone and played them for him once he was healthy enough to listen. I'm the reason none of them got any of his money. He lied to them so they wouldn't attack me when they discovered they weren't getting anything. When my mom's brother died, we went to clear out his house. Their sister was so worried about making sure she got every dime he had, and even though she had already taken control of his bank accounts, she believed he had hidden money in his house. She came and took all of his guns and searched all over for money. My mother was trying to move his things out like a normal human being, and I will never forget her sister saying, "To hell with this shit, find the money." She finally gave up and left it to my mom and me and my husband. My son was about 2 years old at the time and doing 2-years-old stuff and found a jar somewhere in the living room that had $11,000 cash in it. We almost passed out. We stood there stunned. I asked Mom if she was going to tell her sister, and she said, "Yep, when we get to heaven." We split it, and it's still a secret. During high school, we were planning a weekend class trip. There was a girl in my class that I greatly respected and liked to hang out with. She was a daughter of a war veteran that had PTSD. He was violent but had a pretty bad temper, and she had lost her mother to illness when she was just a kid. Regardless of that, she was greatly ambitious, driven, confident, and never, and I mean never, made herself the victim or wanted pity from anyone. Even though we were really different in many other aspects of life, that made me really like and respect her, because I knew how hard her life was. One day we were talking about the trip, and I was going on and on about how excited I am to go. And she casually said something like, "Yeah, I'm not going. We don't have the money. Anyway." You know what I saw the other day? I was left speechless. That felt so unfair and kept bothering me for the rest of the day, so I decided to do something about it. I knew she was too proud to take money from someone else, and she would get mad if I suggested to borrow her some. So when I got home, I talked to my parents, and my dad told me to ask the teacher to make a deal with the other parents so that we all split the cost and tell the girl that the travel agency gave us one free spot. That was usually the deal when there was more than X students going, but we didn't pass that number this time. And if other parents wouldn't want to do that, we would pay for her ourselves. I talked to our teacher the next day, told her not to mention my name to anyone, and she talked to all the other parents, and everyone agreed. So, to make a long story short, my friend soon received the news about an extra free spot for the trip and was laughing out loud about how she got lucky. She indeed went with us on that trip and had an amazing time. I never told her or anyone else that it was me that made that happen. It wasn't some super-duper heroic act, but I still get a rush of happiness when I think about it and feel very proud of that 16-year-old version of myself for doing that. My parents were severely neglecting their dog, so I stole it and gave it to the Humane Society. They were super outraged, but the dog was literally starving. I never told anyone it was me. I filed a CPS case against my own lifelong friend. Went to visit her house after she had kids, and it was a literal biohazard. Animal waste caked into the carpet that was so old it was white. You could smell ammonia from cat pee before you even entered the house. 2 of the girls had awful coughing fits from the poor air quality, mold, blood, dirt, waste everywhere. I secretly took photos while I was there, and the next day filed a report. My friend called me sobbing that they took her kids from her until she proved she could clean and keep up with the house. I pretended like it wasn't me. She did get the house fixed and got her kids back. Those kids didn't deserve to live in such awful conditions, and I feel no guilt for what I did. But I will never tell her that it was me who made that report. My time. My wife loves Duolingo. Got the premium and everything so she doesn't have ads. In the Duo shop, there's a plushie of the owl. I bought it, hid it, repackaged it, printed out a new fake package slip and address form to out on it, made a letter with their header. The week after she hit 1,000 days, I put it on our front door. It was a gift from Duolingo for reaching 1,000-day streak. Had a card directly congratulating her on reaching the 1,000 club. She loved it and felt so accomplished. It sits next to her computer. I planned it as a joke, but she was so happy I can never tell her. When my grandpa died, the relatives wanted to bury him with the family ring on his finger. You know, the family ring that got passed down from generation to generation and was supposed to eventually become mine someday. I didn't care much about getting the ring. It has little, if any, monetary value. But the stupidity of burying a family treasure was, and still is, quite obvious. On funeral day, I stole the ring right from the coffin and hid it in a safe place. It's been decades and I still keep the ring in a secret place. Someday I'm going to pass it to my grandson and tell them the story. Or not. IDK, maybe, my precious. At a garage sale, my mom bought a small end table that doubled as an enclosed fancy spoon display case. Well, I found there was a lock hidden on the bottom with the key taped next to it. So I unlocked the case, moved the spoon so they formed 3 X's, relocked the case, and hid the key in my room. This just happened to be on a Friday 13th. It freaked out my family since no one knew the case opened. Naturally, I would do this randomly. Bad weather days, Halloween, anniversaries of bad events, days I didn't want to go to school. For most of my childhood, after 10 years, my dad just chucked the table after having enough of everyone screaming and freaking out. I witnessed my niece's first steps. I told no one and acted surprised when she did it again a few hours later in front of her parents. A day after finding out my father had an extremely rare and aggressive form of cancer, I found out he was cheating on my mom. He was still in touch with his mistress after being diagnosed. When he was in surgery, I get his phone and contacted her to tell her to cease contact so my mom wouldn't find out. Turned out he had a series of mistresses throughout his life. Mom never found out, and I'm also never telling my brother as he absolutely idolized him. Currently waiting on him in a hospice to die, likely the next few days. It's been 6 months since diagnosis and I think I've forgiven him, or trying to so I can try and grieve properly.